There are letters that were never meant to reach their recipient. But there are letters of another kind. The kind that becomes a death sentence long before the crime is even committed. July 11th, 1906. New York State. The quiet waters of Big Moose Lake. Two people step into a boat. They drift away from the shore, wrapped in the stillness of a summer day. But a few hours later, only one of them will return. When the police arrive at the scene, they find a moment frozen in time. An overturned boat, a woman's hat gently rocking on the waves, and the body of a young girl at the very bottom. She was only 20 years old. Her name was Grace Brown. And before she disappeared beneath these waters forever, she wrote him dozens of letters. She begged. She hoped. She waited. He never replied. Not once. Today, we will find out why that silence became deadly. To understand what really happened on that lake, we need to go back to America in 1906. This was the era of the Gilded Age. Sounds beautiful, right? But the name is deceptive. On the outside, gold, luxury, and rapid capitalism. On the inside, a deep, almost unbridgeable divide between classes. At that time, thousands of young women were leaving farms and heading to the cities, not chasing careers, simply trying to survive. Among them was Grace Brown, a girl from a dairy farm who managed to finish school, already a victory for a rural child, and found work at the Gillette skirt factory. That's where she met him, Chester Gillette, the owner's nephew, handsome, well-traveled. To Grace, who had seen nothing but the fields of New York, he seemed like someone from another world. For her, it was the love of a lifetime. For him, a convenient option for the evening. But in the spring of 1906, everything changed. Grace realized she was pregnant. In those days, it wasn't just a problem. It was social death, total ruin. She wrote to him, begging for help. And he was celebrating the 4th of July with the daughter of a wealthy lawyer. He was looking upward, toward high society. And Grace, she had become a weight around his neck. So he decided to get rid of that weight. On July 9th, they began their journey. For Grace, it was hope. For Chester, it was a calculated plan. Along the well, he carefully covered his tracks, signing hotel registers under the alias Carl Graham. By July 11th, they had reached Big Moose Lake. Chester rented a boat, but before setting off, he oddly returned to the hotel to collect his belongings. Imagine it, a man stepping into a small rowboat carrying a suitcase and a tennis racket. Even the rental owner, Robert Morrison, later admitted it looked absurd. Grace left her bags at the station, certain she would return. Chester took everything with him. He knew there would be no coming back. Around 6 that evening, a single scream cut across South Bay. Sharp, sudden, then silent. Nearby witnesses dismissed it as carefree tourists having fun. 2 hours later, people spotted a man hurrying down the road with a suitcase, never once looking back. The next morning, a teenager named Roy Higby peered into the clear lake water and saw Grace lying at the bottom. The autopsy revealed a brutal truth. Her face had been crushed by a blunt object. But the most horrifying detail was this: she was still alive when the lake began filling her lungs. Chester was arrested at a hotel in Eagle Bay. And you know what struck the officers the most? His reaction. Or rather, the complete lack of it. He didn't look broken, didn't try to justify himself. He simply observed. But the police already had a witness that couldn't lie. Near the shore, they found the same tennis racket Chester had carried into the boat, broken, marked by heavy blows. Why bring a racket onto a lake and then hide it in the bushes afterward? Chester had no answer. November 12th, 1906, the trial in Herkimer. It was a true spectacle. More than 1,000 people filled the balconies. Journalists came from across the country. Everyone was waiting for justice to unfold. But the courtroom felt truly silent only when prosecutor George Ward started reading Grace's letters, one by one. Grace finally spoke from her grave.
I feel so sad. Oh, my dear, if only you were here to kiss me and tell me not to worry anymore. I am crying so much I can barely see the lines. You will never know how miserable I am and how much I want you at this very moment.
Journalists covering the trial noted the only dry eyes in the courtroom were those of Chester Gillette. He took the stand and claimed that Grace had taken her own life after he suggested they go together and confess everything to her parents. The jury didn't believe him. December 5, 1906, after nearly 5 hours of deliberation, the verdict: guilty, first-degree murder. Chester listened to the verdict calmly. Witnesses said he was even smiling.
March 30th, 1908. Auburn Prison, New York. Chester Gillette dies in the electric chair at 24 years old. Publicly, he never confessed. The clergyman who heard his final confession kept its details secret for the rest of their lives. He was buried in an unmarked grave at Soul Cemetery. Years later, a road was built over it. To this day, no one knows the exact location of his remains. Nearly a century later, the case resurfaced once again. In 2007, Hamilton College received Chester Gillette's prison diary and personal letters from his grandniece, Marlon McWade Murray. The writings, later published as The Prison Diary and Letters of Chester Gillette, covered the final months before his execution. What disturbed readers most was not a confession, but the absence of one. Even in his final entry, Chester wrote only, "I know that I am right with God," and that is the all-important thing. He went to his death without ever clearly explaining what happened on that lake. The case refused to disappear. Theodore Dreiser turned it into an American tragedy. Hollywood adapted it into A Place in the Sun. The Metropolitan Opera brought it to the stage. Over the course of a century, Grace Brown's death became literature, cinema, and opera. She was brought home, back to South Otselic, the small New York town where she had grown up on her father's farm and learned to read in a one-room schoolhouse. The funeral was simple. No spectacle, no speeches for the newspapers. Just family, neighbors, and a mother Grace never found the courage to tell the truth. She was buried at Valley View Cemetery with a name, dates, and flowers. She was 20 years, 3 months, and 22 days old. And while Chester Gillette's grave disappeared beneath asphalt long ago, Grace's grave remains. People still visit it. They leave flowers, sometimes letters. Adirondack nights are cold and clear, and locals still tell the same story around campfires and hotel fireplaces. Near Big Moose Lake, especially over the foggy waters of South Bay, some claim to see the figure of a woman in an old-fashioned dress standing silently by the shore before vanishing into the mist. Dunn's Boat Service still offers tours across the lake aboard a restored mahogany boat named Grace. At Big Moose Station,
Staff point to the spot where Grace stepped off the train that final morning. The Herkimer County Jail, where Chester awaited trial, remained open until 1977. Inmates placed in his former cell often begged to be moved. Eventually, the sheriff ordered the cell used only when every other one was full. The building still stands today. Grace Brown wrote countless letters. None of them saved her. But together, they changed American literature, cinema, and opera. And their echoes still linger over the lakes of the Adirondacks. Some voices never fall silent.